I welcome you all to the 7th CD program on surgical tips to simplify the practice. I welcome Dr. Srisha to the meeting.
I'm very happy to introduce the speaker for the day, Dr. Srisha S. She is working as the Assistant Professor, Malabar Dental College and Research Center. She is an oral and maxillofacial surgeon by specialty and a trainer and speaker by passion. She did her undergraduation from Malabar Dental College and did her post-graduation from MES Dental College in the year 2020. Presently, she is working as the consultant specialist in Manu Memorial Hospital, Manjeri. Her area of special interest includes innovative minor and major surgical techniques. She is an active volunteer in Sandwanam Palliative Care Center, and apart from her surgical skills, the poetical art from her imaginative mind helps to heal the wounds of the mind as well. Dr. Srisha, on behalf of IDA Smart City, I welcome you for our 8CD program, and we all are expecting a great.
Okay, Dr. Srisha, the floor is yours. You can continue with the CD program. Thank you,
Okay.
Srisha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to my small session. Considering the present scenario, the main challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, which arises crisis in the various fields regarding the dentistry and in various other fields. Regarding dentistry, there are a lot of specifications and protocols to be followed for a proper patient care. And practice of minimally invasive aseptic techniques are to be encouraged. So, in a day-to-day dental practice, it is inevitable that a dentist should aware of the basic procedures in every specialties up to an extent. And on behalf of the same, the dentist should be more aware about some basic surgical tips, which will be helpful in the daily dental practice. So here I'm trying to get you some basic ideas of oral surgery, which will be useful in the daily clinical practice of the dentist. Okay. So coming to the rationale of my session, I would like to state the principles of oral surgery and to make everyone understand the importance of each and every principles, such as in incision, how to put an incision, how to put a basic incision, and how to raise a flap. At most basic level, how to design a flap, and to understand the importance of basic oral surgery in daily dentistry, and how we can recognize several complications that we have to encounter during our daily practice, and also to manage such complications. Okay. So first of all, we need to know something about the principles of surgery. Coming to doing any minor surgical procedure, as well as it is a normal extraction or transalveolar extraction or anything, we should know about some basics regarding the principles of surgery. That is, the principles of surgery means it contains various entities which are to be allowed while approaching for a simple any surgical procedures like that. First of all, we need to start from beginning of diagnosis. How to reach to a proper surgical diagnosis. That is the first thing what we have to attain at the initial level of our treatment plan. For a proper surgical diagnosis, it should be divided into 5 levels, such as first one is history taking. How to take a history by considering the biographic data, chief complaint, history of presenting illness, medical history, past dental history, like that all. By coordinating that all, we have to get a proper history of the patient. After that, we have to go for a clinical examination. So how the clinical examination is to be done? Should be based on the general examination, intraoral examination, extraoral examination, and based on the laboratory investigation. After these all examinations and investigations, we need to get into a proper clinical diagnosis. That is a proper surgical diagnosis. Then this is the basic principle of surgery. Then coming to the next level, that is the basic necessities for the surgery. What all are the basic necessities for doing a minor surgical procedure? It should be First thing is, as of course, it is the requirement of an adequate visibility, and visibility will be depend upon the adequate access. It will depend upon the comfortable position of the patient and good retraction by the assistant and a high volume suction. This all will facilitate a proper visibility for the surgeon. And next thing is aseptic technique. Aseptic technique, as we know, it is very important in the surgery. That is, the aseptic techniques are the technique which remove or to reduce or to kill the microorganisms from hands as well as objects to employ the sterile instruments and other items. And aseptic technique before and during the procedure is done to reduce the post-operative infections. And this includes mainly maintaining a sterile surgical field, surgical attire, hand washing, surgical scrub, sterile gowning, gloving, like that. And the patient surgical skin preparation, using surgical barriers, including the sterile surgical drape, using safe operative technique, maintaining a safe environment. These all are the things that coming under aseptic technique. Okay. Then coming to incision. What all are the things we have to keep in mind while planning for an incision? What is an incision? Basically, what is incision? Incision means it is a cut or a wound that is made by an operator in the skin or mucosa using a sharp instrument, such as a surgical blade or a cautery, like that, so that the underlying structures can be exposed adequately for the surgical access. And while planning an incision, we have to keep on mind for the certain things. First thing is, the incision should be rest over a sound bone and use a sharp blade of proper size. Commonly for the intraoral incisions, we are preferring number 15 blade, and should be given in a firm continuous stroke, and should be perpendicular to the epithelial surface. Same time, the grafting method is pen graft, and for the aesthetic concern, we can hide the incision inside any orifices, mainly for the approaching to the facial skeleton of the mandible and all. That is why, because we are preferring intraoral incisions mainly than that of the extraoral incision. Okay, these all are the basic things that we have to keep in mind while planning for an incision. By understanding these all basic things, then only we can put a incision, or we will get a courage to put an incision in our daily practice. Okay, fine. Then coming to flap design. How to design a flap? How we can raise a flap? Flap is nothing but, if you know the basics of how to make a flap or how to design a flap, it is easier for us to raise a flap in our daily surgical practice. Flap means it should be outlined by a surgical incision, and it should carry its own blood supply and allow surgical access to the underlying tissues, and should be replaced in the original position and can be maintained with sutures and should be expected to heal. The main concern regarding the raising of the flap is that the base width should be greater than that of the free margin. Same time, the width of the base should be 2 times that of the length of the flap. Then only adequate blood supply will be provided. Okay. Then coming to flap theory. This is one of the most important thing that normally people will asking us. That is, while we are raising the flap, it got teared, bone got exposed, healing is getting delayed. Like that, all things are commonly occurring in our practice. Why this is happening? This is most commonly happening in cases of vertical releasing incision. Whenever we are doing a vertical releasing incision or an oblique releasing incision, there will be chances of high flap tearing. It is because whenever we are planning a releasing incision, it should be put one tooth anterior and one tooth posterior, and it should be started at the line angle of the tooth and should carry obliquely, apically to the unattached gingiva. That is the thing. Then coming to this picture also describing the placement of the vertical releasing incision. And the incision should not cross any bony prominences like that or canine eminence. It will cause dehiscence. Then coming to the, what all are the local structures that we have to consider while putting an incision. Coming to our oral cavity, it is a small space we have to consider. So considering that limited area of the oral cavity, what we have to do is we have to consider the structures of the maxilla as well as the mandible. That is, injury to the local structures of the maxilla. such as greater palatine artery. Greater palatine artery should be considered while raising the flap in posterior palatal region, and while during the closure of oroantral fistulas, like that. And because of the presence of this greater palatal artery, it is telling that we can't put vertical releasing incisions in the posterior palatal region. This is the important concern regarding maxilla. And coming to mandible, in our limited aspect, we have to see for the lingual nerve as well as for the mental nerve. While we are putting vestibular incisions in the anterior mandibular region, we have to consider the presence of mental foramen and the mental nerve and the mental foramen that will be beneath the first and second premolar region, mostly at the apex of the first premolar region. And we have to give considerations while putting incisions in the posterior mandibular region. That is, lingual extension of the incision should not be done in the posterior mandibular region because it will cause injury to the lingual nerve. Okay. Then coming to some of the flap complications such as the dehiscence and necrosis. Dehiscence and necrosis that I had already told you that it's because of the improper flap design. If the flap margin, that is flap base, if the flap base is not greater in width than that of the length of the flap, it will cause dehiscence and it will cause necrosis because of the delay in the blood supply. Okay, fine. Then coming to the summarization of the incision and the flap design, what all are the do's and don'ts? Coming to what all are the things that should be avoided while putting an incision is incision over the bony prominences should be avoided. And another thing is that the incision over papilla, incision should not be done to papilla because it will cause periodontal defect in that area. And incision over the facial aspect of the crown should not be done. It also causes periodontal defect as well as bone exposure and dehiscence. And vertical incisions in the area of the mental foramen, as I told earlier, because of the injury to the mental nerve should not be done. Then lingual releasing incision should not be done in the posterior mandibular region, taking care of the lingual nerve. Then coming to vertical releasing incisions in the posterior palate. These all are the considerations that we have to keep in mind while planning for an incision in the oral cavity for the basic procedures. Okay. Then coming to the types of flap. What all are the basic flap that we can use in our daily practice for our normal simple surgical procedures? One such of a flap is envelope flap. See this picture, you can see this is an envelope flap. Envelope flap is a cellular incision. This is a very simple flap. The incision is made in the gingival sulcus and it is extended along 4 to 5 teeth. And the tissue connected to the cervical regions of the teeth and the interdental papilla is just freed out and the flap is elevated. You can see the exposed area of the bone here. And this flap can be used for any minor surgeries at the area of incisors, premolars, as well as on the labial and buccal and palatal, as well as the lingual surface of the tooth. And also this flap can be encountered in the removal of impacted tooth also. Here we can see the envelope flap given for the removal of an impacted mandibular tooth. Then the disadvantage of this flap is limited visibility and limited accessibility because there is no releasing incisions for this flap. So it will be limited in the visualization. And at the same time in the palatal region, it will be difficult for visibility of this flap in the palatal region. That are the disadvantages of this envelope flap. And another flap is triangular flap. Triangular flap can also be done. In this case, we have to put a vertical releasing incision. As we are providing a vertical releasing incision along with the horizontal, this clavicular incision, thing is that we will get better visibility and accessibility than that of the envelope flap. That is the thing. But difficulty is that as it is a vertical releasing incision is present, it will be the healing will be delayed. Okay, that is the thing. Then another flap is four-cornered flap. That is trapezoidal flap. It can be given in cases where multiple apicectomies are doing in like that all cases. If the multiple tooth exposure we require, in like that all cases, we need to do a four-corner flap. Then another incision that we can put in our practice is a Y incision for the removal of any small tissues or any, not tissues, small bony prominences or any exostosis in this palatal region, you can give a Y incision. This indication of the Y incision is because it is given in the mid-palatal region and it is extended anteriorly and laterally by preserving this nasopalatine as well as the greater palatine vessels. So this is the relevance of putting Y incision. So these all are the basic flaps that we can practice in our normal practice. These are very easy flaps that we can raise by considering these vital structures. Okay, then next is tissue handling. How to handle tissues. This also coming under the principles of surgery. Apart from the careful incision and the flap design, a proper handling of the tissues is also necessary for the optimal and uncomplicated healing. That is excessive crushing, pulling, and extremes of temperature as well as desiccation of the harsh chemicals would be avoided, and it will cause damage to the tissues. So tube to forceps and skin hooks are preferred for handling of the tissues to prevent the excessive pulling and pushing of the tissues, and avoid this excessive pulling and pushing forces during the tissue retraction. These all are the principles. Then the next principle of surgery is hemostasis. How to attain hemostasis? Hemostasis means that is a natural process of natural clotting process by applying pressure on the bleeding vessel or by using a hemostat or by gentle suturing. That is a method of attaining hemostasis in surgery. Then what we have to do is we have to do the debridement of the wound. We have to do the closure of the wound, like that. Then coming to the principles of suturing. That also coming with the principles of surgery. Suture means, what is the use of a suture? Suture means it is to provide an adequate tension of the wound and to maintain hemostasis and to permit for providing support for the tissue margins until they have healed. That is the purpose of doing suturing, and to prevent the bone exposure and also to prevent the healing delay. Okay. And the qualities of the material. What all are the ideal material that can be used for a suturing? The ideal material that can be used for suturing should have pliability, ease of handling, knot security, should be sterilizable. These all are the qualities of the ideal materials that we can use for a suturing. For our practice, for the intraoral purposes, for the intraorally, commonly we are using silk, braided silk is using, and synthetic sutures are, that's a synthetic suture that is most commonly using. That sutures are also preferred, but difficulty is that that sutures are used only when in some cases where the retrieval is difficult. If the suture removal in the deep areas, if it is difficult, we can use gut sutures at that regions. And but the most patient friendly suture for the intraoral procedures is the absorbable sutures such as vicryl sutures. It is seen most commonly used in the intraoral procedures. It is the advisable one. Okay. Then coming to the principles of suturing. As we all know, we have to follow the principles of suturing while doing a suture. Then only the wound approximation will get a proper healing. That is the thing we have to consider in mind. That is the incision line and the point of sutures, point of knots. It should be specific. The knot should not be placed upon the suture line. That is the most important thing. Otherwise, it will lead to infection and other complications. These all are the things that we have to keep in mind. And the depth of the suture. Depth of the suture passing should be equidistant. And at the same time, the knot should not be placed over the suture margins. These are the important things that we have to keep in mind while doing for a suture. And next thing that we have to keep in mind while suturing is which type of suture, which technique of suture we have to prefer for different scenarios. If it is a simple wound, is a simple incised wound of a small size, we can go for an interrupted suture. If it is a moderate size wound, such as an extraction socket of a premolar or a molar socket of a moderate size, we can go for a figure-of-8 suture for an approximate, for a proper approximation. And if it is a multiple extraction socket, which suture we can prefer? Instead of putting lot of interrupted sutures, we can go for a continuous suture. And that is the different scenarios where we have to adapt what technique is to be used. So we should know about that. If so, we can preserve our time. That is the thing. Then if it is a wound having more depth, if it is having the more depth and there will be more chances of hemorrhage, what we have to do is we can go for a metra sutures. And if in some areas that we have to prefer aesthetic importance, we can go for a subcuticular suturing. These all are the different techniques that we have to use in different scenarios for suturing. Okay. Then coming to minor surgical procedures. During the minor surgical procedures, what all are the key points that we have to be remember? One of the most common minor surgical procedure that we have to face in our daily practice is transalveolar extraction. The basic thing regarding the transalveolar extraction is, what is the indication of transalveolar extraction? First of all, when we are planning for extraction of a patient, or we are planning for the tooth removal of the patient, we have to keep in mind whether this will go for a transalveolar extraction or it can be taken by a closed method. We have such a plan before starting the treatment. Then only we can do it accordingly. So what are the indications for a transalveolar extraction? In which all cases we have to do a transalveolar extraction? That is, in cases having, like that in this picture you can see, in grossly decayed tooth that involving decay more than the percussion, or seems to be more fragile, or it is in the lesser accessible areas like in the third molar regions, or if the tooth is nearby to any larger restorations, there will be fracture of the adjacent tooth and the dislodgement of the restoration. If we are accepting such complications, we should go for a open extraction. That is the things. Then coming to the root canal treated tooth. If the root canal treated tooth is more likely to fracture or it become more fragile, we can advise a transalveolar extraction. So these all are the indications that we have to go for a transalveolar extraction. And also in cases of fractured root, if the root seems to be fractured and it is not visible up to the occlusal level, instead of trying the closed method and making complications, we can directly go for an open extraction. So as we had discussed earlier, we can plan some flaps before doing an open extraction. Here in this picture, here we are trying for an open extraction of the premolar. So we are putting a triangular flap in this region, having an incision, vertical releasing incision as well as clavicular incision. And also here we can see for the retrieval of the root tip, another incision is planned. And here also, by considering the mental nerve, we put an incision like this for the retrieval of the root tip at this region. After raising the flap, we can do sectioning of the tooth, or we can do the buccal guttering, or we can create a window with burr holes. That's a post-ambient method. Like that, or we can retrieve the tooth. That all are the transalveolar extraction techniques. Basic thing is we have to know which all tooth will go for trans and which all tooth we can go for open technique. First of all, we need to differentiate that and we need to go on accordingly. We can raise the flap as we had told earlier, and you can retrieve the tooth like that. Then coming to impaction. That is the most common thing that we can encounter in our daily practice. Removal of impacted tooth. Actually, removal of impacted tooth can be done by various methods. And but we have to follow certain principles for the removal of the impacted tooth. Tooth can be retrieved in somehow ways we can retrieve the tooth. But thing is that it should be a proper channel. There are proper principles for the extraction, or there is some proper principles for every procedure. So if we done that accordingly, then only we can minimize the post-operative complication. That is the basics. That is the basics why we have to learn the principles of surgery before attempting to the minor surgical procedures. So while planning for the impaction, we have lot of flap that we can use for the impaction. Here we can see this is an L-shaped flap. L-shaped flap means it is a flap that suits only for the buccal approach. If you are going for a buccal approach, then only this L-shaped flap can be used. And the posterior limb of the incision, you can see, extends from a posterior, from a point just lateral to the ascending ramus of the mandible into the sulcus. And then it passes into the distolateral periodontium. and by invading or including it, and depending upon the proximity of the third molar with the second molar. And the junction may be curved and incision is made in one sweep, or it can be made in an angled fashion. That's all about the L-shaped flap. In buccal approaches only, this flap is done. Then another is, as we had told earlier, it is envelope flap. A posterolateral incision is given from the ascending border of the ramus, and it is curved along the neck of the second molar. Also, it is extended to the first molar region. It will be depend upon the depth of impaction. If the depth of impaction is greater, we can extend the anterior incision anteriorly more. And another commonly used flap is bayonet flap. Bayonet flap means this flap having a three parts. One is distal. There is a distal portion. There is an anterior portion. There is an intermediate or a gingival portion. This flap is also used for the removal of the third molar. And the thing is that the posterior part of the incision goes around the gingival margin of the second molar, even the first molar, before turning into the sulcus. Okay. Then coming to the most commonly practiced incisions of the third molar surgery, that is Watt's incision. One is Watt's incision and another is modified Watt's incision. Here we can see in the Watt's incision, the thing is that here we can see in the modified Watt's incision, an incision that begins. Sorry, here is the Watt's incision and this is the modified Watt's incision. You can see the incision that begins at a 6 mm, basically 6 mm in the buccal sulcus. For the beginners, we can start the incision from the buccal sulcus and extend it upwards. Buccal sulcus at the junction of the middle and posterior third of the second molar. You can consider the second molar as the landmark, and incision should be start at the junction of the middle and posterior third of the second molar. And it is passed upward like this, up to the distobuccal corner, distobuccal ankle of the second molar, and it is cervically behind the tooth. It can be go cervically behind the tooth here like this. This picture is right. Cervically behind the tooth up to the posterior region of the tooth, up to the posterior region of the tooth, up to its middle region. From the middle, it have to be gone laterally, posteriorly and laterally. It is to be done to the why it is given laterally, because there is some retromolar vessels and all. So to prevent the injury of that area, we have to give it as laterally. And another thing is some modification is there, that is modified Watt's. According to this modified Watt's, the incision should be started at the first molar groove. Here we can see the incision is starting from the buccal sulcus of the first molar, and it is starting up to the distobuccal line ankle of the first molar. Then it is curved along the second molar and same as done before. It is extended posteriorly and laterally. Okay. And the indication of this Watt's incision and modified Watt's incision is that if the tooth is more impacted, if it is a partially impacted tooth, we can go for a Watt's incision. If it is a fully impacted tooth, we need more exposure. We have to gutter the bone more mesially. So we need a more exposure. So we have to go for a modified Watt's incision. Okay, these all are about the basic things that we have to keep in mind while planning or while we are doing for a impaction. Then coming to the odontectomy or the tooth division. How to divide the tooth while doing an impaction. According to the different types of impaction, mesioangular impaction, there is horizontal impaction, different types of impactions are there. For different types of impaction, we need to plan odontectomy in different methods. First of all, the most common type of impaction, that is mesioangular impaction. See, in this picture, we can see a fully impacted mesioangular tooth. How to section the tooth in this scenario? In this scenario, what we have to do is a fully impacted position C mesioangular impaction. So what we have to do is we have to section the tooth by removing the distal portion of the crown. And the distal portion of the crown is removed, and we have to put an elevator on the mesial side. So what will happen? The tooth will be pushed out to the distals of it. So it will create a space, because we had already created a space in this region. So tooth will be pushed out to the distals of it, and it can be elevated and taken out. This is the way of removal of mesioangular impaction. Then coming to the horizontal impaction. In this horizontal impaction, you can see is a fully impacted position C horizontal impaction. In this we can section the crown of the tooth. By sectioning the crown of the tooth, crown is removed. Then what we have to do is vertical sectioning of the root. Root is to be sectioned vertically and it should be removed one by one. That's a method of removal of horizontal impaction. Then coming to vertical impaction. How to remove a vertically impacted tooth? See, this is the way. We have to section it along the long axis of the tooth and we have to remove it as one by one. First of all, the distal portion is removed. Then we have to push the tooth to the distal socket and to create the space. Thus it is removed completely. That is a way of removal of vertical impaction. Then coming to disto-angular impaction. The thing we have to keep in mind that the disto-angular impaction, the tooth will be exit out in a distal angulation. So we have to plan it accordingly. For that we have to section, we can section the crown at the cervical region of the tooth and we can remove the crown portion. After that what we have to do is we have to make a purchase point at the root region and we have to pull out the root with any elevator. That is the method of removal of disto-angular impaction. Here, video demonstration of this impacted tooth removal. Here you can see is a partially impacted tooth. So first of all, what we have to do is we have to plan for a incision. Incision is to be planned in an envelope fashion. See, this is the envelope incision that we planning for a partially impacted tooth. Then we are opening the flap like this. So we will be seeing the bone like this. So we can see the tooth and bone in this area. It can be elevated mesially and taken out. This is advisable only in case of partially impacted tooth, where the crown portion is fully visible out. This is soft tissue impaction. Then coming to, see, this is the way of suturing. That's the first suture should be placed distal to the second molar to prevent pocket formation. Then you can see it is a impacted tooth, mesioangulary fully impacted tooth. What we have to do is plan the incision accordingly. Reflect the flap. See, you can see the small portions of the crown. So we have to do buccal guttering. First of all, we are starting with a buccal guttering. And we expose the tooth completely. And now we are going to do the sections, and as we had told earlier, the distal crown is removed and the elevator is applied in the medial portion and the medial crown is also removed. This is the way. Next is, this is a fully impacted horizontal impacted tooth. Here also we can see flap is completely exposed and buccal guttering needs to be done. Then we are sectioning the crown. Crown is sectioned horizontally. Crown is taken out. Then root is sectioning in a vertical way. Then it is taken out. First it is distal and then it is medial. Okay, fine. That is the way. Then coming to the complications, and everyone should be want to know how to manage some of the minor surgical complications in daily dental practice. That is the main important thing that practitioners have to face, and we will be facing a lot of panic situations in the clinic because of the basic emergencies in the oral surgery. First thing we have to face is failure of the anesthesia. Whenever we are given a block or a field block or a nerve block, there will be failure of anesthesia. What will be the cause? It will be mainly because of inaccurate placement of the anesthetic solution, or maybe too small dosage is given. So what we have to do is we have to give a proper dosage and we have to wait for the time for the anesthetic solution to be get acted upon. And what we have to do is we have to check for the subjective signs and the objective signs to confirm the LA has worked or not, like that. Then we have to, if the anesthesia cannot be secured by using conventional techniques of the infiltration or regional block, what we have to do is we have to give a intraligamental, intraosseous or intrapulpal injection. And in case if there is no infection. Okay. Then another most common complication we have to face is hemorrhage. Post-operative hemorrhage will be there, intraoperative hemorrhage will be there. These are most important complication that we are facing in our practice. Then coming to hemorrhage, there will be different categories of hemorrhage. One is primary hemorrhage. Primary hemorrhage means that is the hemorrhage that we can see during the procedure, that is intraoperative hemorrhage, or the hemorrhage that is seen immediately after the procedure. That is also primary hemorrhage. Then another type of hemorrhage is reactionary hemorrhage. Reactionary hemorrhage is a thing is that if the tooth is to be, in case of reactionary hemorrhage, the thing is that there will be hemorrhage after a few hours of the procedure. The patient will be calling back to the clinic and asking whether, doctor, there is a hemorrhage, what to do, bleeding is coming out of the socket, what to do, like that, or patient will be asking out. That is reactionary hemorrhage. And another type of hemorrhage that we can see is hemorrhage after a 7 to 10 days of the surgery. That is what we call as secondary hemorrhage. It will be most commonly seen in the major surgery such as the radical neck dissection, like that, or it will be seen. Okay. So coming to our clinical practice, thing is that we can encounter primary hemorrhage as well as reactionary hemorrhage. If it is primary hemorrhage, what we have to do is we have to do proper pressure pack. We can give proper pressure pack. We can give local hemostatic agents such as adrenaline packing can be given, francinic acid can be given, and same time what we can do is suturing can be given. Surgicel can be given, bond wax can be given. Such are the local hemostatic agents. Application of local hemostatic agents, arrest of the bleeding, suturing, and proper application of the pressure pack. That is only required for the stoppage of primary hemorrhage. If it is a reactionary hemorrhage, there will be different causes for the reactionary hemorrhage. As well as for hemorrhage, there will be different causes. Some of will be local causes and some will be systemic causes. Local causes such as there will be trauma to the soft tissues, or due to any tearing of the vessels of that area. Mainly in the impaction, if we go for the tear of this buccal vessels, that will cause hemorrhage. Risk hemorrhage will be seen in the posterior region. So it all can be arrested by proper special pressure pack as well as by stoppage of the bleeding by suture. It can be arrested. That are the causes of primary hemorrhage. And if there is any systemic underlying disorder such as any bleeding disorders, leukemia, and hemophilia, like that, platelet disorders, any such disorders are there, or any patient is under any drug therapy, that we have to ask in the history. The thing is that what we have to do is for the systemic things. For the systemic things, what we have to do is we have to go on for the systemic things. What we have to do is for the systemic hemorrhage, what we have to do is like we have to rule out the history of the patient. We have to get a proper history of the patient. After proper history of the patient, we have to do it accordingly. That is the thing. And once if a patient having any systemic condition and the patient having any reactionary hemorrhage, what we have to do is we have to call back the patient and we have to ask the patient to take the blood investigation. And we need to refer the patient to any maxillofacial surgeon and to do the further management accordingly. And the basic thing is that we should able to identify whether it is a soft tissue bleed or whether it is a bone bleed. That is the two things that we have to encounter. Whether it is a soft tissue bleed or whether it is a bone bleed. If it is a soft tissue bleed, it will be we can give any local hemostatic agents and we can stop the bleeding by usage of local hemostatic agents by using pressure packs, ligation, that is suturing, like that. If it is a bone bleed, we can use a bone wax for the hemostasis. Okay. And reactionary hemorrhage may be, secondary hemorrhage may be most commonly because of the slipping of the ligations in the major surgery. If like that all happening, there will be reactionary bleed. Okay. Then coming to another complication is a displacement of root, displacement or dislocation of the root. If the root is displaced into maxillary sinus, this is the most common complication encountered in the clinical practice during the extraction of the maxillary first molars or due to the extraction of the maxillary first premolars. The buccal root may be get displaced into the maxillary sinus. So what we have to do? First of all, what we have to do is immediate management. We have to go for a nose blowing test. Then we have to keep a high volume suction at the extraction socket. If it is a small fragment, it will be come out by the suction. If not, if the opening is a little bit big, what we can do is we can put a roller gauze in the area of the antrum and we can push it back with one stroke. Sometimes the root fragment may stick on with this gauze piece and it will be come out. Like that it will be. And next thing is what we have to encounter during the practice is a fracture of the root. Fracture of the root is because of the improper planning of the surgery. Sometimes it may be if the tooth will be indicated for an open extraction while we are planning for a closed extraction, it will be happen for the fracture of the root. If so, what we have to do is we have to go for an open extraction. And we have to take a radiogram. And if the root fragment is less than 5 mm, we can left it there. If it is more than 5 mm only, we need to go for the open extraction retrieval of the root. Okay, fine. Then coming to next things like luxation of the adjacent tooth during extraction. That is the most important complication that we are encountering in our practice, or luxation of the adjacent tooth or dislodgement of the nearby restorations during the extraction of the tooth. Why this is happening? This is mainly happening because of the injudicious application of the forceps as well as the elevators. While using the forceps as well as elevators, we have to follow the principles of elevators. First of all, we should not use fulcrum as the adjacent tooth. As we know, we are using the elevators according to the lever principle. According to lever principle, we should not use fulcrum as the adjacent tooth. While we are using fulcrum as the adjacent tooth, it will happen for the luxation of the adjacent tooth. So what we have to do is, in such cases, we have to, in severe crowding cases like that, it may happen. So in such cases, what we have to do is we have to support the adjacent tooth with the finger, and thus we can prevent the transmission of force to that area. That is the thing what we have to do. Okay. Then about the fracture of the restoration. If such a chance we are suspecting, what we have to do is we have to warn the patient previously before the procedure is to be done. There is a chance of dislodgement of the restoration, so we have to do the after treatments like that, or we have to warn the patient. Okay. Then another main complication is tuberosity fracture. You can see the tuberosity fracture. The thing is that if the bone will be attached to the periodontium, what you can do is you can adapt methods for the survival of the same. If it is a tuberosity is highly mobile, if tuberosity is highly mobile, what we can do is we can splint the tooth being extracted with adjacent tooth, and after the healing of the bone, it will take 6 to 8 weeks, we can extract out the tooth by an open method of extraction. Or else what we can do is you can section out the crown from the root and you can keep the root there if no pathology is present. That is also a method. And another thing is oroantral communication. If there is an oroantral communication happen, what we have to do? Management of oroantral communication is basically based upon the size of oroantral communication. If it is less than 2 mm, no additional surgical intervention is required. And if it is between 2 to 6 mm, what we have to do is we have to give a proper closure, proper suturing and proper watertight closure. If it is greater than a 7 mm, we have to go for a flap. We can advise a buccal advancement flap or a palatal advancement flap, bridge flap, pedicle flap, like that. We have to do. As we had studied the incisions and flap design, we can do it like that. Then same time we have to give for the sinus precautions. Sinus precautions like patient is advised not to blow, not to sneeze, not to smoke, like that all. And at the same time we can give the antibiotics along with decongestants. Okay. Then another complication is gingival lacerations. You can see gingival lacerations and soft tissue lacerations. It is because of the injudicious application of the forceps as well as the elevator. Long duration procedures, it may lead to Laceration. So previously there will be lacerations during the extraction of upper third molar. There will be lack of visibility as well as accessibility. So we are using forceps for a long time. There will be chances of injury of the gingiva of the corner of the mouth as well as. So it should be, if the wound is, it should be debrided properly and antibiotics should be prescribed. That's all. Then coming to a rare complication, that is fracture of mandible. It is not at all a rare complication. It may happen because of the application of the force, application of the improper usage of the forceps, or without practicing the correct principles of elevation while we are doing the procedure, while we are trying for closed method in the cases where the open method is to be indicated. In such cases, it will go for the fracture of the mandible sometimes. If fracture is happen, nothing to do. What we have to do is manage. We have to go for the fracture management. Okay. Then coming to next complications like that, dislocation of the temporomandibular joint. Dislocation of the temporomandibular joint is most commonly happening because of the long duration procedure. It is not at all a surgical procedure. If it is an endodontic procedure also, it may happen. Because of the long duration opening of the mouth or a sudden opening of the mouth, the jaw may undergo dislocated. In such cases, it is a common complication that we are seeing in the dental clinics, where while doing a longer duration procedure, there will be more chances of dislocation to the mandible. If the mandible is dislocated for a longer duration, if the procedure is doing for a longer duration, there will be high chances of dislocation of the mandible. If it is happening, so we can go for the reduction. We can go for the reduction to the previous position of the mandible. That is, Nelaton's method is to be followed like that. Mandible is to be pulled in a downward, backward, upward direction. Like that, what we have to do is we have to put our thumb. Our thumb is to be put over the occlusal surface of the mandibular molars, and we need to hold the mandible. We need to hold the jaw with the remaining 4 fingers, and we need to give a downward, backward, and upward force. So then it will get into the proper joint position. Condyles will be get into the proper joint position. That is the method of treatment of dislocation. Open jaw will be mainly seen in the dental practice because of the long duration procedure. So now we can manage it accordingly. Then another thing is, as well as for any surgery, another thing is ecchymosis and hematoma. Mild ecchymosis, especially it is seen in the elderly patients with increased capillary fragility as well as the poor tissue elasticity is more commonly seen. And extensive ecchymosis and hematoma may be result due to any improper hemostasis during the surgery management. Okay, then what we can do is we can give intermittent ice pack 30 minutes per hour like that, and following with we can give intermittent hot packs also, and it is used to resolve the condition. Then after that there will be discoloration for the hematoma, so it is informed to the patient. Then another important complication is post-operative pain. Post-operative pain, it may be due to trauma to the hard tissues as well as due to trauma to the soft tissues. And due to the trauma to the hard tissues, there will be bruising of the bone during the instrumentation or overheating of the burr during the bone removal. This all may lead to post-operative pain. And in case of soft tissues, it is if the flap is a ragged flap, that is the incision is not proper, flap become a ragged flap and the soft tissue become entangled with burr and improper retraction, post-operative swelling. These all may lead to post-operative pain. Okay, and next is the edema, that is the post-operative swelling. If the soft tissues are not handled carefully during an extraction, traumatic edema may be formed. That is use of blunt instruments and the excessive retraction of badly designed flap or a burr becoming entangled in the soft tissues predisposed to this condition. And if the sutures are tied too tight, post-operative swelling due to edema or hematoma formation may cause sloughing of the soft tissues and breakdown of the suture line. Okay, that all are the complications. And another one is infection. Infection may be due to pain and swelling. If, so what we have to do is give antibiotics, and also moist packs can be given if the infection occurring due to any swelling. And another important complication is a dry socket. Dry socket is it is a condition where the loss of the blood flow from the socket. What we have to do is we need to diagnose it first. For that, gently pass a small probe into the extraction socket if we can see a bare bone that is extremely sensitive. and there is absence of separation. That is an important feature. And foul odor will be present, and severe radiating pain that is usually described as throbbing ache pain, like that it will be telling. And the symptoms generally start on the 3rd to 5th day after the extraction of the tooth, and if untreated, it will last for about 2 weeks. And what we have to do is we have to give a proper socket irrigation with warm saline, and all degenerating blood clot is to be removed. After that, any sharp bony prominence or spools should be excised out with a rhoncha, and a loose dressing needs to be given. A loose dressing with zinc oxide eugenol, any Optident dressing, clove oil should be given and is tucked into the socket, and as also can be given. And the pad should be changed for every 3 days. Okay, so these all are the most important complications that we are facing during our daily dental practice, and my time is getting to be up, so I have to wind up the session. So coming to the summary of our talk, what we have to take in mind is while treating a patient, we have to go for a proper diagnosis and a proper preparation, as well as we have to do it under a aseptic technique. Okay, then coming to the summary. So what all will be the complications we should know to manage up to an extent. And following the basic principles of oral surgery, it should be more easier to execute minor surgical procedures and to manage some complications during the extraction. And the thing is that these all are my references. And coming to this is a wonderful moment to express my thanks to all of them who and support me to stand here. And I would like to thank my professor and HOD of Malabar Dental College, Dr. M.S. Balakrishna, for help and support. And also I would like to thank my sir, my guide and mentor, Dr. Umarim, professor and HOD of MES Dental College. And I would like to thank my favorite ma'am, Dr. Roshni ma'am, my professor at MES Dental College. And in all, I like to thank to IDA and IDA members for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very wonderful section. We are having two questions. One is, can you name the burr used for sectioning the teeth?
We can use a straight fissure burr of 703 or a 702 burr can be used for the sectioning of the tooth.
The second question, 1 second. The second question is, as often we encounter during impactions, especially horizontal impactions, straight handpieces are difficult in gaining access during tooth section. Do you suggest to use contra-angle surgical handpiece, pneumatic or electric?
Yes, you can use for the contra-angle surgical handpiece. It will depend upon the practice of the surgeon. Actually, while it is for the general practitioners, it is difference in the opinion. Actually, contra-angle handpiece is more good for the vertical sectioning of the root. Some people are telling like that, but if we are used up with a straight handpiece, we can do with straight handpiece also. It's not such a difficult task. I think so.
The third question is, ma'am, can you please repeat the management of secondary hemorrhage?
Okay, secondary hemorrhage means it is a secondary hemorrhage means it is a hemorrhage that usually seen after a 7 to 10 days after surgery. This type of hemorrhage will be most commonly seen in the surgical procedure, that is in the higher surgical procedure. I don't know whether it is in the minor surgical procedure. Mostly it will be seen in the higher procedures, such as in the any neck dissections or like that or procedure it is seen. This or in oral surgery also it will be seen in any resections like that all cases. It will be due to the slippage of ligation. Sometimes in the major surgical procedure we have to ligate some of the vessels, such as facial artery, like that we have to ligate during the surgical procedure. If any slippage of the ligation happen, there will be chances of a secondary bleed. So what we have to do is we have to identify the point of bleed and we have to ligate the thing, and we need to manage it accordingly. That is the thing.
The next question is, how do we differentiate between bone bleed and soft tissue bleed clinically?
Clinically, what we have to do is we have to look for a proper examination we have to do. If it is a bone bleed, it will be coming out of the socket, and mostly in the case of impaction, the bone bleed will be happening because of the injury to the inferior alveolar artery. So we can see a bleed from the socket region. So it will be a bone bleed. If it is a capillary bleed, it is a bright bleed that is coming from the soft tissue region, it seems to be a capillary bleed or a soft tissue bleed.
The next question is, how to check the sound bone?
How?
How to check the sound bone? I am not sure what she meant.
How to check the sound
Bone. I think you were telling about the dry socket, and you told to insert a probe and check the sound. That is what she meant, I suppose.
Oh, okay. That is thing is that we can see actually in the dry socket. The thing is that we can see the background. That is only the concept.
That is all for the questions, ma'am. I'm having a question. Suppose there is we get a dry socket case or a case after extraction. We see that the bone is exposed. What do you prefer to do? Either the trimming of the bone, or again opening up the socket and suturing it, or what?
No. What we have to do is thorough irrigation. Thorough irrigation of the socket and the removal of the old blood clot and the debris is to be done, and we can go for an Octudent dressing. That is enough.
No, ma'am. I'm asking about if the bone is exposed.
Okay, if the bone is exposed, thing is that we have to, if any sharp prominences or like that is there, we have to remove that. Otherwise, there is no need of exploration in the socket.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I think that is all for the questions.
One more question is there.
One more question.
For a distriangular impaction, how can we elevate the tooth mesially? Is there any method to mesialize the tooth so that is easy to elevate?
Actually, in the distriangular impaction, the point of application of force is point of application of elevator is distally only, because according to that, actually we tell the point of application of force according to the, we have to plan the preoperative planning is to be done according to the Moorlines. We have to go for the Moorlines planning before the impaction is to be done. And according to the position of the red line, that is the point of application of elevator. For the distriangular impaction, it will be the point of EJ is distal point. So theoretically, what we can do is the point of application of elevator is distal.
Is there any questions more?
Can you please repeat the type of suturing adopted for each type of wound?
Okay. Main suturing technique is that if it is a simple wound, for the simple wounds, we can do a interrupted sutures. Based upon the size of the wound, we can plan the suturing up to an extent. And if it is a coming to the intraoral wound extraction. So it is a simple extraction. We can go for a simple interrupted suture, and a traumatic flap removal. We can go for a simple interrupted suture. If it is an extraction of a multiple tooth, we can go for a continuous suture or a continuous locking suture. That will be good. And in case of any aesthetic considerations, basically it is for the facial wounds and all, you can go for a subcuticular suturing. And if it is a tooth socket having a moderate size and get a proper approximation, we can get a proper approximation, we can go for a figure of eight suturing. And if it is a deep wound, it is a deep wound for a metro suture, like vertical matter suturing, like that.
The next question is, ma'am, post extraction, if bleeding continues for 3 or 4 hours, what is to be done?
Post extraction bleeding, if it is continuing for 3 to 4 hours, it will be a reactionary bleed, or it is an intermediate bleed. In such cases, what we have to do is, there will be, it may be because of any local causes, less chance for being the local causes, maybe because of any systemic causes. We don't have to rule out any systemic conditions. If the patient is having any bleeding disorders, or if the patient is, if our history was not properly taken, we have to select such a, and we need to go for any blood investigations. First of all, we need to do for the local measures again. Local measures of hemostasis is to be done. Same time, we have to go for the systemic investigation along with any blood history, like antibiotic therapy, like that, or we need to initiate and plan it accordingly. And we can give systemically tranexamic acid also.
Leah Babu is having a question. What can be done during extraction for getting a uniform alveolar ridge in the total extraction case?
It will be depend upon the area of extraction of the tooth. If we are doing an extraction in an anterior mandibular region,
It is for a total extraction
what we
case, ma'am.
Yes, for the total extraction case, what we have to, for the proper ridge, what we have to do is, we have to follow the principles of surgery accordingly. If we are doing the every steps according to proper principles, we will definitely get a proper result. That is the thing. There is no special technique for the same.
Ma'am, what I feel is during, after in a total extraction case, we can remove the sharp points with a bone ronger and a file, and filed up, and then suture
Yes,
them
sir.
so that you can
Yes,
get.
sir. Yes, primary alveoloplasty. That is, we can done during the multiple extraction cases and total extraction cases also.
I think no more questions. Deepak, can we wind up the session?
We shall conclude, sir. So,
Yeah.
On behalf of IDS Smart City, I would like to thank Dr. Srisha for an excellent session she presented here. And this time also we had almost 80 participants. That is a very good number as far as a branch like Smart City is concerned, because a lot of people from Smart City, and also this time we got a lot of students from, I think even from Malabar Dental College people were there, from Anu people were there. So from a lot of educational institutions also we are getting students. So and this one actually a very difficult topic. It was said in a very positive manner and also in a very simple manner. So once again, I thank Dr. Srisha for an excellent session, and also I would like to take this occasion to thank MedPiper Technology for assisting us, and the members of IDS Smart City, and also the IDS other IDS members for making this program a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all who has attended the program. Thank you, Dr. Srisha, and thank you.
Sorry, it's not audible.
I'm sorry. Might be
Not audible, sir.
Might be a net problem. I once again thank all the participants as well as Dr. Srisha and also MedPiper Technologies for the program. Thank you very much. Deepak, was I audible?
Yeah, yes, doctor, you're audible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.